Good morning, boys. Dusk Warden here. So I've decided to come today with a new video. I'm gonna do a Templar Zealot guide. So I've decided to start with Zealot. I think it's because it's the most stable spec out of all three Templar spec right now, and also low-key the one that's been asked more than once. So I decided to just start with this one. Um, so Zealot. So Zealot is the dual wield spec. If we look at the talent description, it's a chain of zealous strikes with growing potency, blah 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 blah. So Zealot uses the same oath chain system as the rest of Templar. I'll have a little bit of an explanation of the leveling really quickly, and then I'm just going to transition into kind of like a more end game vibe and stuff. Not that it's not that I don't care about leveling too much. I just don't think that there's too much information really needed, because anything that's applicable in dungeon is going to be useful for RDF leveling, and anything that's like anything else, like leveling is kind of like, it's just easy. You just have to put time into it. Like realistically, you can probably just like spam lunge your way to 60. So I don't think it's like too worrisome. Um, but I'll go like when we're making the talents, maybe like some pointers. So what's the idea of the spec, right? So Zealot, compared to the Crusader, which wants to extend its oath as long as possible, and Oathkeeper, which is a tank, which is completely different, right? Zealot would try to get a middle length chain and just do it properly over and over, and you're trying to spend it properly depending on what you build. So, being Zealot, you're going to play around multiple new spells. The first one is Vindication, which is going to trigger a Zealotry and give you a buff to Zealotry, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit later. And you have Righteous Upheaval, which is a new combo breaker, which is like a physical hit, but deals more damage for each Zealotry that you triggered in your Oath Chain. So, um, as you can see, it's a little bit different than Chastise, because it has its own intrinsic scaling mechanic to its damage compared to just scaling with your oaths. So it kind of has like a double dip of scaling, but it also means that the base damage isn't like so high. If we look at my tooltips for level 60 here, it kind of says like dealing 560 physical damage, increased by 6% for each Zealotry. If we look at Chastise, it's 863, but it's also holy compared to physical, so it doesn't get reduced by armor. So what you end up is Righteous People kind of like baseline is like something like half of the damage, like a Chastise, when it's not stacked at all. So you end up having to use it when it's stacked, which is, it's not like a huge problem, but it is something that kind of matters. Now, those two mechanics together, I've mentioned Zealotry. So Zealotry here is the very first node in your passive to get at level 10, which is basically your offhand auto attacks trigger Zealotry, which deals like a proc of offhand weapon damage as holy damage. The intrinsic mechanic of it is basically you just get free procs of like Main Gauche. If you're familiar with Combat Rogue, you get free procs of Main Gauche, which is just like an offhand double hit type of effect. But you have a lot of interactions with Zealotry. So if we go into the talent tree here and we type Zealotry, right, you're going to see that so many things light up. I'm not going to go into every single one of them, but a few notable things. It does intrinsic damage. It boosts Righteous Upheaval by a significant amount. You trigger secondary effects from triggering themselves. And you also increase the physical damage taken by your target up to 10% for each Zealotry. And to the right here, your Divine Fury level 40 passive, which is like your proc. If you're familiar with Crusader, it would be kind of like your Scarlet Hammer equivalent. The Divine Fury is every time you do 10 Zealotries, you transform your Chastise into a Divine Fury, which is kind of like this cleave holy hit that does its holy damage and reduces armor. So which is it's a good thing to hit, although the damage on it is pretty weak right now. I really hope they buff it soon. I did mention it. I hope they look at it a little bit more, because it's kind of, really mid. So, um, the thing is, you kind of have another thing, is Blade of Fate. So for Crusader, Blade of Fate isn't so strong, mostly because Chastise gets additional scaling, so you end up not really hitting Blade of Fate just because of how strong Chastise is for Crusader. And for tank, you're not really incentivized to like bother with this one. But for Zealot, it's a really really strong part of your damage. So Blade of Fate is a long dot. It's a 21-second dot. We can talk about that later for um, one of the capstones, but it doesn't really matter. But the thing is, Crusader Zealot has a secondary dot, so you'll have your Condemn that you're obviously gonna want to stack multiple times, and then you'll have your Blade of Fate that you're gonna want to upkeep. If we're just looking at like a really quick tooltip difference, from my little 60 character right now, Blade of Fate would do 1568 holy damage over 21 second, which can crit as a dot. It can crit natively. And if you look at like Chastise, it deals 863. So we're looking at like very close to double the damage. We're looking at like 80% more damage baseline. Um, so you're definitely like looking for like a very strong alternate finisher. Um, Upheaval having a 20-second cooldown baseline, which we're gonna not take the talent for the reduction, but I'll talk about that in a second. But what this means is you end up having two 20-second long cooldown finishers. So you're kind of gonna end up trying to like chain them. So what you're gonna what you kind of want to do is Zealot's chain is fixed at 17 seconds with a talent here that boosts your O chain by 2 seconds, which means it brings it from 15 to 17. So not having infinite chain, except you can extend it with Titan Strike in Execute, which is really, really good because you can get up to like 25 seconds ish. But um, you're still not going to be infinite. So what you're going to want to do when that happens is you're going to stack for like 25 and you're going to start choosing. So basically the conditional is if you get max stacks of Zealotry on Upheaval, you're going to use Righteous Upheaval. If you don't, if you're not going to get it, like in a sense, like you can kind of know ahead of time. You're like, okay, am I going to use Vindication enough times to get max stacks or not? And if you won't, then the correct answer would be to Blade of Fate. But you can kind of decide that because whenever you start your rotation, you're just like every other Templar spec. If you're an AoE, you start with cleave, 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 cleave until your target cap is reached, right? And then you're gonna start hitting your single target, which would be Lunge, Condemn, or Vindication. Now, if Condemn's not up, you're gonna want to put Condemn up, right? So if you go, okay, Condemn, 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 you cleaved a lot. Now you need to Condemn because you don't have a spread mechanic like Crusader. So you're going to have to just cleave it to spread your Condemn, which does a ton of damage for you. So you're going to cleave, 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 Condemn, Condemn, Condemn. Well, that's like 8 seconds. That's like half of your chain is gone. So if you start hitting Vindication, now you're not going to get max stacks for Upheaval. So you know, okay, this is going to be the Blade of Fate combo. So now you start stacking lunges to buff your Blade of Fate. And when you do that, and then you cast your Blade of Fate, big, big damage. What we're going to do is your next combo, you're like, okay, my Blade of Fate is sticking, so my next combo has to be Upheaval. So where you're going to go is like cleave, 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 Vindication, 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 Vindication. Condemn to like keep up the dot, right? Just keep it up. And then you should reach your max stacks on Upheaval and be able to do a big, big Upheaval. That would be the theory, right? So that's kind of like the rough goal. Now, let's talk about a few key points. I'm not going to talk about stuff like 20% increased damage on Oathbreakers. Like, that's cool, but it's not really class changing. Although I'll talk about the talents later. But you have multiple things. So the very first thing is Heaven's Finest here, which is pretty down in the tree. You can only get it level 33-ish. Don't quote me on that, but it's around level 33. Whenever you get this ability, you are energy infinite. What this ability does, this talent does, is any damaging ability grants you a stack of Heaven's Finest, which increase movement speed. Doesn't fucking matter. But at 6 stacks, you increase your energy regeneration by 100% for 8 seconds. Additional application do not refresh the duration, but you can start restacking Heaven's Finest from the base. So Whenever you hit 6, you're just going to get like a different buff that's called Heaven's Finest. And then in those 8 seconds of 100% energy regen, you're able to start buff, like stacking your next Heaven's Finest, which should proc when your old Heaven's Finest has like 2 seconds remaining. Ish, like 1.5 seconds remaining. So you're technically always gonna have 100% energy regen, which means between this node here, which is 20% energy regen, your energy regen is at 12 per second, and you're gonna regen 100% more, so you're gonna regen 24 per second. Now, at 24 per second, you're gonna say, okay, well, I'm still negative, but if you look at the Condemn and Vindication, they cost 30. Cleave costs 35. Well, you're at like a 10 deficit, right? Ish. You're at 10 deficit for Holy Cleave, 5 deficit for those two, and then Lunge is 40, so you're at like a 15 deficit ish, right? Well, if you proc Divine Fury, it's a free global. So Divine Fury is a free global, so that means you get free 24. So you just regain the value of about like 5 globals of negative energy. And then whenever you get Blessed Strikes, your energy, your Outbreak is reduced by 10, which means stuff like Blade of Fate is 25, so it's neutral. Upheaval is 25, it's neutral. Chastise is 15, so it's neutral. And then you have Titan Strike, which is 15, so you're under. Like, so you just end up having absolutely infinite energy. The only time you'll ever start feeling throttled a little bit by energy on Zealot is if all you do is lunge, like for 6, 7 globals in a row or something, well, you'll start being throttled by energy. But it's really not that bad. Um, so that's your energy mechanic. The second mechanic here is Force of Gulg. So Force of Gulganet is this 2-minute cooldown right here. Basically, this is going to be an insane portion of your damage. What it does, it's a 2-minute cooldown. You just start exploding every 0.5 seconds, doing a ton of holy damage and triggering a zealotry on every single enemy for 5 seconds. So it happens 10 times. Well, 11 times because 0.0 is 1. So it happens 11 times. So 11 times of doing this ton of holy damage and triggering a zealotry, which does variable damage depending on your stuff, but whatever, right? What this does is just do so much, but also because you trigger so many zealotries, you have so many Divine Furies, especially in AoE, right, that you're just infinite energy. Um, so you do have this mechanic going on. This is like a huge cooldown. If you ever wanted like a huge, I'm gonna win, I'm gonna do double damage this pull, this is it. Like this is the one spell. It's absolutely fucking OP. And then here you have your unique Libram. So your unique Libram is kind of shit. Like this unique Libram is actually kind of shit. What it does is 20% melee haste, and your damaging ability reduces the cooldown of Righteous Upheaval. But because you wouldn't want to use it more often anyway, because it's not strong if you don't stack it, you're better off literally just stacking it. So the secondary effect of this is like completely useless. So for Zealot, the Librams, you have like 3 DPS Librams. So you have Consecration, which is the damage proc. You have Fervor, which is your scaling, like steroid Libram. And then you have Libram of Zeal. You use them in that order: Consecration, and then Fervor, and then Zeal. And then you reset. And if you want to use another one, then you use the defensive ones for some reason. Which we're going to talk about the capstones later. On the left side here, it's pretty standard. On the right side, I guess we'll go to that just in half a second. But here on the capstones, which is the only real choices, it's kind of your capstone. I go for Sanctify, which is haste, melee haste on Librams, which should be up pretty much 100% of the time. And then you have Pulverizing, which is your Condemn has a chance to proc and do like a bunch of AoE damage. So it's a very good source of damage in AoE. It's not the best in like single target, but there's no real like other option. Here you have Glory. Glory looks like decent, but like for in terms of like damage, what it really is 30% attack speed for 10 seconds every 2 minutes. Because the leech on it doesn't really matter for us as like a PvE DPS, and then the attack speed is just melee haste. Like it's just melee attack speed. Like it's not It's not like a hate. It's not a bloodlust, right? It's just attack speed. Um, Notable thing would be Silverhand Incantation, which is like a big charge that does like AoE damage, but the damage isn't big enough for the cooldown it has to not take Sanctify, which is a permanent melee haste. And then it requires you to take like a really bad pre-capstone. So it's not really usable, in my opinion. So on the right side here, um, I think I'm just gonna let you guys see this, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go into the opposite direction, and I'm gonna tell you why I don't pick some stuff. I'm gonna make a notable executed decision. Take this off. Take this on. This, like this, right? Um, so this is the PVE damage build, right? So I'm gonna go with more like why I don't take some stuff because I think it's gonna be easier to understand. So I'm not going to bother explaining every single node, but here it's a pure healing node. The only reason I added on is because I was doing some farming. So it's pretty good for leveling, but it's completely useless at endgame for damage. Here, this one node increases damage of Chastise on enemies of 75% health or affected by Tranquil Circle. You never want to use Chastise. So, especially not on an enemy that's like CC'd randomly. Like, you never want to use Chastise. It just fuck ups everything. It's not good. It's PvP only. Here you got reduce the cooldown of Righteous Upheaval by 5 seconds. And here you got increase the critical damage of Righteous Upheaval. So, reduce the cooldown of Righteous Upheaval. It's a 20-second thing, but you're not going to do every single chain as Righteous Upheaval because Blade of Fate is so strong. So, there's no use lowering the cooldown from 20-second because you're only going to use it every other oath chain, which means you're only ever going to use it once every 35 seconds ish. So it's useless. Like to lower the cooldown, it's not good for at least for again for PvE. And the crit damage thing is I just think there's more damage in other nodes because you don't use Righteous Upheaval. You like again use it once every like 35 seconds. And yeah, you can kind of like force some crit if you have like condemn stacked, but like because you're like really incentivized to stack vindication, you're kind of like pushing out your condemn scale, your condemn pumping during that. So the odds of you having a ton of crit stacked up, even if you have a lot of crit as well naturally, like isn't crazy. So I don't think it's a really good node. There might be some implication to take this instead of some of the other more passive like points, but I just don't see it really. Here to the right, again, that's just healing, and the testaments don't really do anything for our damage. Notable point here, stun. Like your stun's gonna trigger a lower cooldown when used on enemies affected by Blade of Fate. I'm sure you guys can understand this is 100% PvP. Like there's no reason to have 30-second less on a stun that's really bad anyway. So this is the reason I'm taking every other thing. In terms of the chose nodes, so here in the right in the middle, you have a damage node, and then you have a healing node. I think you guys can understand why we're taking what we're taking. And then to the bottom right here, we have the actual choice node that means something. So the first one is dealing damage with Condemn, Holy Cleaver, Blade of Fate, including every single tick of those, has a 15% chance to trigger Zealotry if you're within melee range of your target. And then the other choice is casting Righteous Upheaval or Blade of Fate that grants you Oath Retribution and start your Oath chain. Oath Retribution is 5% crit damage increase. Yes, it kicks back your Oath chain. It doesn't really matter because you're going to want to stack it like high, right? But also, it just means with this, right? It's like crit damage increased by 5% permanently because you're just using those two Oath Breakers over and over, right? But the other one, especially in AoE, when you're gonna spam cleave and you're gonna have Condemn ticking on everything and you're gonna have Blade of Fate ticking on a lot of them, you just have this insane fishing for Zealotries, which is gonna fish for more Divine Furies, which is gonna give you more cleave damage and give you more energy regening globals, which is gonna reduce the armor of your target. So the reason why I think this is better than permanent 5% crit damage is because you're just gonna proc so much from this in AoE. And in single target, I know it's not going to be crazy, but because you're already going to naturally do a way less Zealotries if you can't cleave, right? You're going to use this with Condemn and Blade of Fate to fish for some additional zealotries to try to feed yourself divine furies a little bit more often, because in single target it's like difficult to really stack this properly if you're not playing very well or have full uptime. Um, so that's pretty good. Here are the capstones. So the capstones are actually kind of interesting. So um, the capstones. Okay, how do I start this? Let's go with the one I don't take. Again, let's do this thing where I don't take this. So the Might of Akramor here, physical damage dealt now has a 25% chance to reduce the increase the tick rate and reduce cooldown of your next blade of fight. Blah blah blah. Blade of fight doesn't have a cooldown anymore, so it's like a tooltip error. But the reduced tick rate, what it does is basically it's just gonna like compress your dot, right? It's good, but it just makes you use Blade of Fate. Like you're gonna just push everything out and use Blade of Fate, Blade of Fate, Blade of Fate over and over and over. Would be the theory. I don't think it's necessarily that practical to only ever use Blade of Fate, and you also just end up having a lot of like dead talents if you start not using other spells. So for example, if you don't take that, if you never use Upheaval, well then you'll never use Vindication, because you're just better off using Lunge. And if you never use Vindication, well then every talent that interacts with Vindication becomes worse. But because you never use Vindication, all your Zealotries become worse, because they all don't feed into Upheaval, which means that now you're doing it just for Divine Fury, which isn't even that good in and of itself. So that means that you're just having this talent are all like worse. This talent's gonna be more difficult to use. Like you kind of just like it's a good talent, but I don't think the thing it's pushing out takes more space than you actually realize. Here at the bottom, Blessing of Agrimar, Righteous Lunge now has a 25% chance to generate an additional stack of Righteous Lunge. It's just not good enough. Like I just because like if you read this properly, like 25% chance for 100% stack, and it's not even cast again. It's like it's not even casted twice, right? It's not like a 25% chance Wind Fury. It's actually just getting a stack. So what it means is your oath is bigger. So for Righteous Lunge, it's 12% more damage. Well, if you just like Phantom it on average at 25% more, it's 3% more effect on Righteous Lunge Oaths as a capstone. I think you guys can like understand that this isn't groundbreaking. Like when you have to go like cleave, 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 condemn, 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 vindication, vindication. You just didn't do anything. You just didn't do any lunge at all, right? So you're just kind of ending up with like this weird like poo poo situation, or just this capstone spends half of your rotation just not doing anything. Here you got Norgannon's Rat. So Norgannon's Rat is your, it's kind of cool. It looks good. It's a Kamehameha. You leap into the air and then you throw like a big spirit bomb, and it explodes and it deals damage um, to up to 10 enemies. It reduces their damage and healing done for a few seconds. Not by enough for it to be like an external. Not for long enough for it to really matter. Uh, Damage dealt pierces immunities and damage of return and stuff. Not relevant in like any fight ever. It scales with modifiers to chastise. Good for Crusader, not for Zealot, because we don't do anything for chastise. And it's a 30-second cooldown, and the damage that it does is not really good enough to justify the 30-second cooldown. The problem with this ability is that it's just a PvP thing that's range as a range bomb. It's not bad, but for PvE, it's not worth the sauce, like at all. And then we have to the right here at the bottom, an actual contender. So Fury of Agrimar increases the damage dealt by Libram of Consecration by 100%. So Consecration is already like a big portion of your damage because it's really strong and you have it up so often. But it increases the effectiveness of your Librams in general. So this is actually a usable capstone. We're going to talk about this when we talk about the other one. Here we got Blessing of Ionar. This is permalock. So basically, using Libram spells now increases your damage dealt and healing done by 10% for 15 seconds. Basically, you're going to munch your Librams for this buff. You're going to cycle. You have 5 Librams, right? And they all get reduced by your auto attacks here. So what you do is you go Consecration for 15 seconds, and then after that, you just go Fervor for 15 seconds, Zeal for 15 seconds, Grace for 15 seconds, Tenacity for 15 seconds, and then you cycle back. And you should be able to have 100% uptime on this. Like, even at like heroic level gear, I can have 100% uptime on this if I accept going into Tenacity sometimes. But basically, this means manage that buff, and you're gonna have permanently 10% damage dealt. That's the capstone. Um, if you think you're not going to be able to upkeep it 100%, you can extend the time you spend in Consecration, so you're not like shit out of luck, right? So this is like 100% permalock. Now there's this talent here, One with the Light. Pretty cool. Casting Oath Breakers triggers a zealotry on your targets and reduces the cooldown of your Librams, Force of Golganet, and I don't even know what the fuck Mortal Abdication is because I think it's a tooltip oversight. Basically, every time you're going to use a Null Breaker, you're going to trigger a Zealotry and reduce the cooldown of Librams and Force of Gold. Why I'm taking this is I think we have like an interaction with AoE, but I need to do a little bit more testing on this because it's not consistent because the cooldown reduction on this is more than it should. But it essentially the entire justification for this capstones is more casts of Force of Golganet equal good. Is like basically if you're able to get even a single Force of Golganet extra cast in any situation, it's Biz. Like this is the best talent. So unless every single thing you fight would die under a minute 30 or something like that, then this isn't good. But outside of that, this is super super strong. Um, and then this one again, if you don't like One with the Light, you take Fear of Agrimar. That's your choice, really. So that's for the talents, right? Now for the gear. The gear for Zealot is very simple. You have one scaling passive. It's called Combatant. Increase your holy spell damage by 30% of your attack power. What this means, you go full attack power. Congratulations. You don't really go dual scaling anymore because you just gain more from AP. You can take some duals, like some hybrid gear. For example, this one, like this ring, right? It has agility, attack power, and spell power. Really, really good ring. But you're almost better off just going full attack power. And the reason for that is because attack power scales your weapon damage, and your weapon damage is your zealotries. And the stronger your zealotries are, the more it's going to be worthwhile to proc it on so many things. So, not only that, but it's also going to be your auto attacks. And Zealot also has an insane portion of damage contribution based on auto attacks because we have so many melee haste abilities. We have so many things that reinforce proccing, extra swings left and right, right? So what's going to happen is you're just so better off building auto attack or passive AP, and also all the scalings on all the abilities like natively, they all have dual scaling, which is most of them are like slightly heavier, like something like 40% like SP, 25% AP. But you can get 1,000 AP before you can get 300 SP or 400 SP, right? You can just get so much more AP, and AP also contributes to your base damage on your weapons and everything that scales with weapon damage. If I can give an example, right, like Righteous Lunge. Righteous Lunge is a great example because Righteous Lunge deals weapon damage plus 249 for me right now. Let me just use Gift of Zeal, right? It's going to stay the same. It's also 249. But if I go Fervor, it's still 249. It's the same shit. If I look at Vindication, if with Fervor, I'm at 461. And if I use it with Zeal, I'm at 481. So, what this means, everything that scales with both, it's just easier to get AP. And all your spells that do weapon damage plus X, the plus X portion is hybrid scaling, but the weapon damage is AP scaling. So essentially, you have double AP scaling for 1 part SP scaling. This is why we're going full AP, because not only does it does that, but it goes all the way back down to SP because you convert it to SP. So if you're gonna have half of the SP, if you're gonna go from like 1,000, like I'm gonna use like roughly like MC numbers, right? Just like rough math, but like if you would have 1,000 AP, it would give you 300 SP. If you instead choose to go hybrid, you would have something like 700 AP, and that would give you, I don't know, like 225, 250, no, 225, right? Whatever. Let's say 225 SP, and then you gain maybe like 150 SP tops. So you go to like 400. But like for 100 SP, you lost like 300 AP, kind of. You know what I mean? Like it's like this is rough like napkin math, but like um I in the alpha, right? Even if the system of the chain is different from the alpha, the scaling of most spells has, interestingly enough, remained the same, and the passive 30% AP to SP is the same, which is kind of funny. But I had a full set of best in slot Crusader gear, which is full hybrid, and I had a full set of like best in slot AP gear for like rogue with like a mix of rogue and hunter sets, and it was full. It was like the most amount of AP you could have in the entire game. Like I forfeited crit, I forfeited everything just to get it, and I did more damage with my physical. So it's kind of just like proof. I mean, of course, we need to like retest it when we have more gear, which isn't really something I can do in like heroic gear, just because the tier sets and stuff are like too hard to get for whatever it's worth in difference with this low stats on the gear. But the concept would still go full agi, full AP, and then if you can get some free SP, do it. If you can get some free crit, do it. Haste is also not bad. A few percentage of haste would not kill you at all. It would actually be pretty good. So that's for the gear, right? So AG, AP, SP, crit is your order of preference. The only reason I'm scaling Agi over AP is because Agi also gives you crit, so you have like a double portion of scaling from Agi. But they're pretty interchangeable. You just have to do a little bit of testing, but they're pretty close in value. Now I'm gonna show you guys what I mean with a cycling rotation. I'm not gonna do it like forever, but I'm just gonna go ahead and do like a little bit of it, right? I'm not gonna use Force of Golganet and my Liberums because it's I might use my Liberums, but I'm not gonna do Force of Golganet just because it's just a button you press and you win. Um, so if I was to start the fight, I would go like this. I would just go in with lights, sting for my energy, stack condemn, 1, 2, 3, and then I'd start using Vindication, right? If I wanted to go for upheaval first, Divine Fury procced. Good. Then I'm going to start lunging, refresh, spin at the last second, and then you go lunge, and then you next combo is going to be Blade of Fate. So we go lunge. We refresh our condemn before it expires, and we just keep lunging because there's no use pressing anything else. One last one, and then Blade of Fate at the last second. We have a huge Blade of Fate tick, and then we go Vindication. We press this, we maintain our dots. It's important to never let condemn drop. So we Vindication a few times, right? And then we start lunging a little bit at the end. We reach max stacks, we expand. Divine Fury, refresh the dot, and then we go lunge, because we're going to do another Blade of Fate combo, right? This isn't like the most optimal thing because I'm kind of like talking, so I'm really not like super focused actually. There's a little bit of optimization I could do to this, but it's very, very close. Boom, massive one. Vindication. Divine Fury whenever it procs. We refresh our dot. Then we lunge with Divine Fury. And then we lunge. We're going to reach our 30 stacks, right? We're on track, so we're going to do it. Boom. Last second, we spend. Boom. So we lunge, Divine Fury, maintain our dot, and then we lunge because it's going to be a Blade of Fate combo. So we're just going to stack as much damage into the Blade of Fate combo as we can. Lunge. Make sure we refresh at the end so we're not fucked. Blade of Fate at the last second. Press a lunge, Divine Fury, Vindication to start stacking it. So with just Vindication, like 4 or 5 stacks, that's enough, right? Divine Fury, Condemn to refresh. Boom. And that's the last global. We press Divine Fury. lunge, lunge, because it's going to be Blade of Fate combo. So it's just this cycle, right? All right, we condemn again to keep it up, and then we lunge, we lunge, we lunge. We're kind of just abusing it. We're just pressing it as much as we can, trying to get as many lunges as possible. Oh, I lag because so you guys can see, right? I made a mistake there. So one of the mistakes I made is I pressed Divine Fury when I didn't have the spare global, and I didn't pay enough attention to the how many seconds I had, and I had just a little bit of a mess because I'm lagging a little bit because I'm recording. I had just a little bit of a mess, and I made the wrong decision to press Divine Fury, so I drifted my cooldown just too long, and what ended up happening is I missed my Blade of Fate combo because I was too greedy, right? So the mistake there was to actually press Divine Fury instead of waiting to use it outside of the oat chain between the two oats. So that was like part of my mistake, right? If we look quickly at the damage breakdown for that thing here, you guys can see like lunges are top damage, but it's mostly because 53 casts. Meanwhile, Condemn with 14 casts did pretty much half of the damage, but for a quarter of the presses. So what that means is if you keep it up without letting it fall, you can do so much more damage per press than Righteous Lunge, right? Now, Vindication, if you can see, did very low damage. But the reason for this is because Vindication is going to give you 12% chance to trigger a Zealotry on your damaging abilities. You'll never need to really, even on the upheaval combo, right? You'll never really need to stack this more than 5 or 6 stacks, as you guys could have seen maybe on my weak core right there. So why the reason for that is just because if you do it early enough in the combo, between your natural auto attacks and your procs of other zealotries from like a bunch of different effects, right? You don't need to go 100% on your zealotry procs for you to reach the 30 stacks that's the maximum of righteous appeal. So you're better off stacking lunges at that point, which is the reason I never went max for this, which is also why the damage is pretty low on this. Now, you guys can see Divine Fury is really low on the damage breakdown. It's a little bit better in like dungeons and in AoE, but in single target, it's really not big. I'm not 100% sure. I think it's bugged, or I think there's something that's fucked with it. I think what happened is that they nerfed it because we were omega stacking like oats on the beta. But what happened is when they nerfed it and then we don't omega stack oats anymore, like they never re-enabled it to scale with oats. So it's very much not like a very high priority button. You're kind of doing it for your energy economy. Um, I wish it would be buffed. I want this to be like around the Blade of Fate damage or the melee damage because it's such a fun proc, but it's not good. Which is also why I really made a mistake using it. It's kind of just like a hold habit to use it so fast, which is like a bad habit. But it is what it is. Um, Upheaval is pretty high, mostly because we got almost all crits. If you guys can see, like we cast it 4 times for 8 hits because technically it's like 2 weapon swing, whatever. But we crit 7 out of our 8 hits. It's really good. So which is also a good portion of why this is higher than Blade of Fate, because Blade of Fate did the opposite. It basically almost didn't crit. Um, but in 3 casts, if we had one more cast, right, it would have done, total damage of it on this, right, is about 31k for 3 casts, and then Righteous here is 45 for 4 casts. We would be at like 40k to 45 if we cast it one more time, if we had really been equal, right? But also there's a little bit of like RNG here, where it is RNG because it's not like we stacked crit, like we didn't stack condemn. So this isn't, we're not like playing around critting. So this is one of the issue with like a very like short test this. But the reality is, on average per cast, it does the same damage. However, we have RNG on our side to kind of disprove this example, but it's just a smidge of damage more. So just like trust me on that one, it's a smidge of damage more. Um, but it's you want to go from one to the other one. From everything I've tested, if you just try to like mega stack Blade of Fate over and over, It doesn't seem to do as much. If you try to just like, if you would change right to the 5% reduced cooldown so that you could upheaval every combo, you're also kind of like not doing as much just because you're gonna use so many more vindications. So you're like your other spell damage is gonna go down by like proxy. And if you were to replace all of this with chastise, we can do it. So we said, okay, we did what, 7 finishers, right? Let's do a chastise just for the example. We're gonna do a only hitting chastise, like kind of dumb situation, but just to show the difference, right? So we go in, we condemn, and we're just gonna hit chastise, right? So we're just gonna lunge. We just lunge now, and we just lunge, and we lunge, and we lunge, we lunge, we lunge, we bleed, we chastise, then we attack, Divine Fury, lunge, 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 dot, lunge, you know? So, big chastise, and then we hit again. We refresh. It's gonna take forever. This is gonna take forever. We're just gonna do this at this one. We're gonna try tree versus tree. So another 9k. Alright. Chastise is pretty big. So we got 2 crits and 2 crits, 1 normal, for a total of 24k. If we compare this to the last training test, right? And we go to Blade of Fate, which we also cast 3 times, but we are missing. We have basically we reverse again. We need to like normalize crit, but we did 31k with less crits versus Chastise that did 24k with more crits. So I just wanted to do this like really quickly to prove that Chastise spamming was not the way. Just want to prove it kind of like randomly. Just kind of want to prove that one real quick. So yeah, that's kind of the Zealot guide. A few things you need to pay attention to is cycle your Librams every 15 seconds. You're gonna want to change, right? Change your Librams. Change your Librams for Blessing of Ionar. Press Force of Golganet. Like I can do it right now, but it just does big damage. Let me just go next to this mob. You guys can see the swarm of things that happens. Really good. Whatever. Just remember, cycle your things. Feel free to come back to whatever. I didn't sort the AoE rotation, but like you guys can just see the logic. It's just cleave. Do your rest of your rotation. Cleave up to target count, and then do whatever seconds you have left of whatever other ults you want to do. Is and has always been the way to do it. If you guys have any questions, something I didn't really cover that I forgot, just ask in the comment or something. I'll answer. I'm kind of just freestyling this, but yeah, this would be like the Zealot endgame beginner cover rotation explanation guide thing, whatchamacallit. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Again, if you have questions, ask in the comment. I'll do my best to answer. Thank everyone for watching, and I hope you guys have a great evening and a good day. Peace.